thank you for being here. Those of you who are in a class, thank you for coming to class. We value that just as much as those who aren't in class, believe it or not. Really thrilled about what's about to happen tonight. Here to celebrate a book I'll talk about in a second with a really distinguished and fantastic group of folks, many of whom already knew each other coming in today. Lots of friends and extended family in the audience, so it's a good reunion of sorts in many ways. First up, I want to thank everybody who made this possible. First and foremost, the Popular Music Project of the Norman Lear Center that I direct. The Pop Music Project, not the Norman Lear Center, but the incredible team who literally makes this happen. Scott McGibbon over there, our DJ for the night, absolutely. And where did Veronica go? Is Veronica still here? Somewhere all the way in the back. Thank you so much for the flyer, for all the work, and for the pairs. For the pairs. Yes. Who needs pizza when you have pairs? I also want to make sure to thank Norman Lear himself. Norman, many of you know, Norman just published his memoir at the tender age of now he's 92 years old, and just published his memoir and sent us a note that he had every intention of being here with us tonight, which would have been a Pop Music Project first, except he had to go accept the Penn USA Lifetime Achievement Award. So he can't wait to watch the video, but Norman is here in spirit, and we're really, really thrilled that he's helped make this happen. Rest in peace tonight, of course, to Big Bang Hank, who we lost today. This is a panel that I think is celebrating the history, present, and future of hip-hop. So he is here with us as well. This panel and discussion comes as part of an interesting year for the Pop Music Project at the Lear Center, where we've been focusing on a theme that I developed about a year and a half ago with Jay Period, a DJ in Brooklyn, based around the idea of the crossfader. The crossfader, I'm sure most of you know, is that horizontal toggle on a traditional DJ mixer that allows you to move between channel A and channel B, input 1 and input 2. And Jay and I have been trying to think about how the crossfader as a technical tool, as a technique, as a practice, and as a technology can actually be used to think about larger social issues. So what does it mean to crossfade in everyday life? What does it mean to crossfade culture, crossfade languages, crossfade national identities, national borders? How can we actually take the lessons of hip-hop musically, technologically, as practice, and translate them into languages about new forms of social action? How can hip-hop teach us how to live better, more ethically in the world? And in a lot of ways, the book that we are here because of, that we're here to celebrate, Check the Technique V.2 from Brian Coleman, right here, sets this out for us. This is Volume 2. I have some numbers here. Volume 2 is 525 pages. It's big. Volume 1 was 509 pages. So that's good. You went up just a little bit. Yeah, it's really good. There will be no Volume 3, you've hinted.
Probably not.
Probably not. But what we get with these books, and Brian's got a stack for sale tonight, and then a book signing tomorrow night at Art Forum and Adrian's Space downtown with lots of special guests that you'll talk about for a more formal signing and selling of books. But what we get here actually in the intro to this by Adam Mansbach, Adam points out that he says what's so important about the writing in these books and the interviews in these books is that it gives us not hip-hop as a product. For many of you who've been raised of a certain recent vintage within hip-hop culture, the idea of hip-hop as something other than a product might be really strange and kind of mess with your head. But there was a time when hip-hop was all about the practice before the product. And these invisible liner notes that you'll hear about from Brian in a second are a reminder of what Adam talks about as the process of hip-hop. That what they give us is the process of how records get made, the camaraderie, the conversations, the collaborative effort that is behind every single record. And they're extraordinary, extraordinary documents. And I just want to say before I turn it over to Brian that in reading through Volume 2, You know, it's like you go through, I don't know how many of the panelists have had a chance to read it yet, or read at least chunks of it, but you go through, and just when he's like on page 16 of breaking down one record, you're like, okay, it's got to be over on the next page. But no, there's like 17 more pages, just like the minuscule details that Brian digs up that he holds as being just as important as the big picture. It's a really extraordinary achievement. Any of you who are hip-hop fans, these books are essential reading that give us a history that we didn't have. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and then we're going to have a group conversation. But please welcome Brian Coleman, author of Check the Technique, Volume 2.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here, so I thank you very much for having me out here. And I thank the panelists. It's a real honor just to be up here with everybody. I mean, the books are basically, I've kind of said it before in interviews, but they're very selfish in a way in that this is stuff I want to know as a fan. Things that, some of it's been out there in magazines before, maybe here and there sprinkled, but never kind of in one place. And that was always my goal, is to put it down in one place and not have it kind of scattered everywhere, and put it in book form so there's a little bit more permanence. And the other thing too, so I know that if me as a fan, if I want to know this stuff, that there are thousands and thousands of other fans just like me who want to know the same things. They might want to know about different artists than I do. But for the most part, I think that there's a wide enough range so that even if you only like half the artists in there, or maybe you go into the books liking half the artists, hopefully you'll pick up another couple that may be your favorites down the road too. You might be like, oh, I never really knew much about whatever group. You know, I was a big fan of Public Enemy, and I never really knew much about Mantronics, but then I kind of, you know, really started to check them out and liked it. So the book's kind of sprang out of some work I was doing in the journalistic world, mostly from XXL magazine in the late 90s, early 2000s. I did a column called Classic Material, and I would do interviews, and I would do these very lengthy interviews with artists, and they were always kind of cutting any journalists kind of know, they were cutting my word count back and back and back and back, and I started to get kind of frustrated. So I just felt, I'm going to do these the way that I want to do them and really blow them out. And maybe it'll be too much, and maybe people don't want to read all that. But you know, you can always kind of fast forward through a book if you want, skip a couple pages ahead, or go to the next chapter. So my first book came out in 2005. I self-published that one. It was called Rakim Told Me. And that one was much smaller. That one was a mere 238 pages. And that one did pretty well. I didn't really know what was going to happen with it, but I put it out and sold a couple thousand copies of that. And so my next one came out through Random House in 2007, and that was the first Check the Technique. And that one also did well, B+. The esteemed B+ gave me a bunch of amazing photos for that one, and that had 36 chapters in it. And so this one has been kind of 7 years in the making. Not 7 years straight. I probably worked on it for about a year straight last year when I finally kind of hammered through it. And this one, the difference with the new one is I tried to include a lot more visuals. So there are magazine ads from when certain albums came out. Some artists gave me photos. There'll be different scans of single covers and labels and things like that, because I think the visual element's important too. And each one that goes along, I've explored that more and more, and so I'm pretty happy. There's about 350 images total in this new one, ranging from just kind of magazine ads down to like General Steel from Smith & Wesson literally has a scrapbook of stuff that he saved from back in that era, and he just kind of scanned pages for me, and so it kind of ranges from that. And I think, just kind of in closing, really what the books are about and the chapters are about is it's about the artists telling their own story. And Brother Jay was very kind and generous when I did the X-Clan chapter in the last book, and it's really about not about kind of what I think about them. I think I try and generally just act as a tour guide and kind of guide the stories along. But I think there's a lot of books that are out there that tend to be kind of, here's, you know, the top 100 list of this, or here's what I think. And I just thought there needs to be more the artists kind of saying what they think about an album, because I think that's there are a lot of great books out there going back to It's Not About a Salary and beyond B+'s work from 1993, going way, way back. But, so I think that's important, is to have the artists kind of talk about their work as artists, first as fans, as how they got into hip-hop and how they made that step from being a fan to being a creator, being someone who wanted to express themselves, because all of us are fans, including the artists themselves. But to take that extra step, I think, is an important one, and that's one that I'm always pretty fascinated with. So hopefully, I think the chapters covering the albums, hopefully they accomplish that along the way.
Can you talk a little bit about the methods you use to get the interviews? Because we don't, in many of the cases, the questions aren't there. We have the answers in terms of the track by track kind of oral histories. Could you talk a little bit just about the way you would frame gathering information?
Well, the method is a lot of begging, a lot of private investigator style work of tracking people down. Sometimes it's gaining people's confidence. It's kind of, you can get to an artist through one of their associates, but that still doesn't mean they're really gonna kind of open up to you right away. So I think there's, in the process, a lot of times maybe you don't really get to the good stuff until about a half an hour, 45 minutes into an interview, once you kind of get into a rhythm and you have a comfort level where, I mean, I think a lot of artists, and these guys can relate, there's a lot of people who talk to them who really want pull quotes, and they want a couple little things to sprinkle in an article, and they don't really, honestly, a lot of them don't really want to know, don't want to get that deep, because they know that the article they're writing is not going to really allow them to. And I don't really do those kind of articles, and I never liked them, which also means I've never been able to make a very substantial living as a freelance journalist either. But so, methodologically speaking, I think, so what I do is I start with certain facts that are out there, facts that I've known, that are kind of my own, mythology that I've heard over the years. I go back and try and find old interviews with the artists. I'll even use, and although I can't stand Wikipedia, it drives me crazy, I'll sometimes use that as a beginning point, because I think the scary thing about Wikipedia is I think a lot of kids out there use it as if it's fact, and it's not fact.
None of them know what you're talking about. None of them have ever used Wikipedia
never.
for paper.
But so I kind of make it, so I try and, if there's something that I do find out there on an online source like Wikipedia or others, I always make sure and double check it and verify it, because you never know, especially Wikipedia, but I could go on and on about that. So really what it's all about is kind of starting with a certain group of facts, a certain number of questions, but I think the important thing is the interviews are conversations. They're interplay back and forth, and that's really where a lot of the good stuff comes out. So, and you can never really tell what direction an interview is going to take when it starts. Sometimes it'll be a half hour and they got to go and that's it. Or sometimes, I mean, I remember in the Roots chapter from the last book, Questlove would just keep calling me back because he's like, oh, I forgot to, there's this other thing, and that's dope. Like, I love that. That's actually my favorite, is when it's when the people get that kind of invested in it and they want to share more and more, because sometimes I'm asking, if I asked anyone here, what were you doing 15 years ago on August 3rd? Like, I wouldn't know. So you can't really expect people to have exact, precise recall, and sometimes it does come back to them, or sometimes they'll start to say, like Joe the Butcher Nicolo on the Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince chapter in this new book, he was like, you know what, like, why don't you call me back in another week, and I'm going to think about everything, I gave you some stuff here, but why don't call me in another week, and then I'm going to have even more stuff that I'll go through some of my files and I'll listen to the record again. And that's fine too. Like, I don't expect people to have it all on complete, exact recall, like right on demand.
Cool. So among our panelists tonight, we do have Brother Jay from legendary X-Clan in the house. I wanted to ask you, could you talk a little bit from the artist's perspective of what this process was like, of revisiting the record that was in the first book, right? You were in the first book. What the process was like, you know, from your point of view. Did it change the way you thought about the record and kind of going through that remembering process? You on? Should be good.
Check.
1, 2. That's what's up. Building with the brother was it was kind of easy to go back, man. I mean, those are the golden eras of when we were innocent with the music, man. So to go back and think about the equipment that we were using and what we were achieving, you know what I'm saying? That was a heavy thing. You know, we had I was talking about how we had one turntable that we stole from a club and a radio with one speaker, and we got through half of East Blackwoods, you know what I'm saying, because we understood our breaks, we understood our timing, and going into the lab, you know, to sample and just take the sweet spots of the beat and just rock. It just was, you know, technology and block party at the same time, man. So it's a pleasure to think about that. And then the movement side, you know, so much things were happening at that time frame. You know, racial tension was high like it is now. You know what I'm saying? So to be the kind of CNN of that and then do your dream at the same time, it was a golden platform for us.
One of the things in the oral history for that record in the first book is you do talk about the 90s as that moment, as this kind of, you know, historical moment. Can you talk a little bit more about, I mean, you just referred to it as the kind of innocent days.
I mean, yeah, because, I mean, you was, you know, going to the block parties for reputation. You know what I'm saying? It's like being a ball player. If you have reputation in different hoods at different ballparks, when you become an NBA player, you got fans in places. So, you know, to get a deal was like, you know, you got a pro deal. You know, I went to school with Jungle Brothers and Quest, you know, and we were just contestants in the talent show and Murray Bertram, and then to see everybody just blast off, you know, it was a prime time. You know what I'm saying? I was honored to be in those kind of circles and in the role with Bam. And, you know, I'm looking in the book and I saw, you know, Master York when he was doing music. You know, that's how real I know his material is and how real his research is, because, you know, Master York is very high scholar, respected, you know, in my areas of knowledge, man. So to see him live his dream and music out and influence MF Doom and a lot of other artists, you know, what he was doing behind the scenes, you know, I like to see history like that, and we were part of that history, man. So,
if those days were innocent, so what's changed into the guilty days?
It's kind of whack to know. You know what I'm saying? When you're doing it, and it's like, you know, Indiana Jones, and you just happen to get out of the cave. You know, you know what I'm saying? You don't. You know, when you got the map and you think too much, it's too much options, you know what I'm saying? So now as a businessman and all of that, you know, you learn through getting jerked and taking shorts and different things like that, and you rise up. You know, at the end of the day, you sit in front of a good crowd, you know, who wants to hear you and respects your poetry and your lyricism, man. So, you know, it's a bittersweet thing, you know what I'm saying? But the innocence, it does carry it. You know, when you're channeling, bro, it's the best energy. You know what I'm saying? That's the best way to put that.
Also with us tonight is Oliver Wang, the end there. Might know him from soulsides.com. Might have taken a class with him in sociology at Cal State Long Beach. Professor Wang, esteemed DJ, hip-hop historian, editor of classic material, and author of the forthcoming book, Legions of Boom, all about Filipino-American mobile hip-hop DJs in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Not hip-hop, but mobile DJs, yes.
Mobile DJs, sorry. You even warned me to not do that, right? Yes. See what happens? And that'll be out next year.
April.
So I wanted to ask you, as somebody who both is a practitioner, but also a student of hip-hop, at the same time, you've done so much work around the historical nature of hip-hop. Why do you think that there is this kind of history problem? Or do you think there's a history problem? But why, you know, we don't have these liner note histories before these books. Is there a kind of historical consciousness issue with the way that hip-hop is talked about?
God, give me the easy question.
Come on.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. I mean, I have a hard enough time having my kids come to my class, let alone
right.
on a Tuesday night you're turning out for a panel discussion. So thank you for, again, coming out to hear us talk. I think part of it is generational, which is to say that when I was going through, not even undergrad in the early 90s, but even in graduate school in the late 90s, there was only maybe, I mean, literally a handful of texts that you could turn to in terms of people who had bothered to document or investigate the history of hip-hop. And I always wondered how come nobody was doing it, but I realized it was just because hip-hop itself was of a certain age, and you needed to give the generation of young people to age into a point where they could become the journalists and the authors and the historians and the scholars time to sort of mature and begin to tackle that. I mean, if you look at the difference in the number of books around hip-hop that have come out, let's say between 1990 and 2000, and compare that with 2000, 2010, I mean, it's I wouldn't say that we've reached parity with rock music by any means. I mean, there's probably more books about Bob Dylan than there are about hip-hop. But that said, I feel like I think the momentum is starting to catch up, because I think that you now have multiple generations of people who've grown up with hip-hop as their formative idea of what music and culture and rebellion is like. And I think you give them enough time and the right tools, they will begin doing that documenting. And I think Brian certainly was early in that respect. I don't think he would think this, and I hope that he's not the last person to do this sort of work, because, I mean, as many albums that have been tackled in the 3 books that he's done, you think of all the other potential classic important albums that have come out in hip-hop and the kind of liner notes that are waiting to be written for that. I mean, it's going to be endless. So, again, I just hope this is just the first of many books that will come out along the way.
Do you think, I was trying to, in preparing for this gathering, was thinking about that early moment within hip-hop DJ culture of the kind of now infamous and mythologized, but true, erasing of the labels off of vinyl, soaking labels in water to get them off, so no one knows what records you're playing. Right. And so on the one hand, there's that idea of like, I don't want you to know the sources. I don't want you to know the kind of historical archive that I'm working with. And yet everybody who's not wanting you to know the historical archive knows a deep historical archive. So there's this kind of doubleness around knowing your history. I mean, every great hip-hop producer is a great hip-hop producer because they know their history, and but at the same time they know when to erase it so no one else can figure out how they pulled it off. I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out to you as someone who you spent a lot of time digging and looking for samples and.
See, YouTube ruined all that, because there are no secrets anymore, right?
That's right.
I mean, I'm being slightly facetious, but I do think that at a point at which the knowledge out there can circulate in a way, whether people like it or not, and I'm not saying it's just, that information should always just circulate without any kind of limits on it, but I think the fact is the information's out there. It's really hard to keep anything a secret, and if that's the case, then if we've already crossed that threshold, why not put the effort in now to document these things deeper and better? There's no point in holding on to the secrets, because the stuff isn't a secret anymore for the most part. And I think we're in a point now, whether you want to call it citizen journalism or not, people who want to document these things, it really just takes reaching out and doing it. And the platforms exist. You may not get paid to do it and make a living off of it, like as Brian was putting out, but at least it's a way for this knowledge, I think, to circulate in a way that wouldn't have existed in the era of when Bambaataa and Kool Herc were bleaching titles off of labels and putting stickers over stuff. The cultural capital, I think, was just different at that point.
Right. There you go.
Well, I mean, the one thing I would say, and that is true, obviously, in a lot of ways, but a lot of the stuff like in my books is not secret knowledge. It's just no one's asking.
Right.
So it's not. There is definitely, especially when you get down to samples, like what'd you sample and would you do this, or if there was some kind of dispute or some kind of a lawsuit or whatever. But generally, I think that's the important thing, is that a lot of the artists they're not trying to hide the information. It's just no one's really asking them about it. So that is happening more and more and more, and that's great, because I think that, talking about the innocent times and everything like that, because I remember the one thing, and I don't want to derail the panel, but I was talking to Eric Sermon from EPMD about their first album, and halfway through the conversation, he was recalling the album as he went along, and you can imagine the BS that he's gone through with, you know, producing on his own, producing for other people and major labels and blah, blah, blah. He was like, that really was a dope album, wasn't it? Like, he had forgotten how good his own album was. And it's like, yeah, like it was. And but like a lot of times you can get tied up in that BS, like so hard that you forget like those innocent times and why you got into it in the first place. So. And you don't want nobody biting your chemistry. Yeah.
I was just saying, not to take it any further, but you don't want anybody biting your stuff, man. A lot of DJs like Bam especially, I used to try to peep at his music because he was playing such rare breaks. And, part of hip-hop is the journey. You got to get out and go dig in the crates on your own instead of just hearing somebody else stuff and saying, oh, I'm going to go make a playlist off of his set. Me and Shaft back in the days, God bless, we used to go to St. Mark's and sit in the record aisles and have the portable turntable and pull it out and listen to breaks on our own. And when you finish, the fruits of your spoil, you don't want nobody to come over and bite your list. I would put all kind of stuff on my labels, man. You know what I'm saying? To block you from looking at my things. I know what my records look like, just from the color of the label. I just need to leave an edge on there, and I know what it is. And the covers, you know what I'm saying? The covers were a journey. That gave you a chance to touch the artist in a way to look at a part of their mind on the cover to draw you to, not just to a sale, but to the type of music you were listening to,
Thank you. Also with us tonight, we've got Adrian Young in the house, who is the man behind Venice Dawn, Black Dynamite, Ghostface Killer record, Souls of Mischief record, Delphonics record, the new Prime record, which will be out December?
December 9th.
The entire album is built on samples from Adrian's own music.
Yes.
Also is responsible for single-handedly upping the sartorial game of our group tonight. What I wanted to do is maybe get us to talk a little bit about the latest Souls of Mischief record, and kind of, Brian, maybe could we do like a live Check the Technique on the Souls of Mischief record and get some stories from Adrian?
Go for it.
Well, tell me how did it, I don't even know if this is on. Tell me about how did it start? Like, was that you coming to them coming to you? Kind of
Well, I'd finished my first album with Ghostface called 12 Reasons to Die, and that was like 2 years ago, I think, something like that. And when I wrapped that album up, I was trying to determine what my next hip-hop album would be. And just to give a little background, I'm a dude that lives hip-hop. I love hip-hop, but I always tell people that I left hip-hop in '97 because after '97, like, hip-hop just changed, the culture just changed, and it just wasn't speaking to me anymore. Not that people weren't making good music anymore, but the subculture wasn't as live as it once was. So I just kind of left. And when I was presented with the opportunity to create the Ghostface album, I wanted to make an album that made me feel like I felt when I used to listen to hip-hop prior to '97. So that being said, on the heels of finishing the Ghostface album, I was trying to determine who I could work with that could give me that feeling again. And I've always been an avid fan of Souls of Mischief to the point where on 9-3 Till Infinity, I knew every single word to the album. Seriously, I still do. But to make a long story short, we hooked up on Twitter. Somebody had a message that said, I would love to see an album with Adrian Young and Souls of Mischief. And then A+ from Souls of Mischief said, yeah, that's cool, we're fans. And then we just talked, and then me and A+ talked, and then a few days later, I talked with all the guys. And then about a week later, I spoke to Redmatic, that's by the door over there. And I said, yo, I might be doing this Souls of Mischief album. And then we just got into it.
He's shy.
Then we just got into it from there. It was pretty easy.
With the Prime project, could you talk a little bit about how that happened, what it feels like to be the kind of unilateral sample guy for that
Yeah.
record?
So for those of you that may not know what I do, I'm a producer and I do everything with live instruments, but I record everything to tape. Everything's analog. There's no digital components in my studio. So I view myself as a 90s hip-hop producer that went back to late 60s, early 70s to produce hip-hop music for today. So in doing that, I learned from studying my favorite composers from yesterday, like Isaac Hayes to Curtis Mayfield, to my favorite composers from what I deem the golden era of hip-hop, like RZA or like Primo. So this Prime record is a record that is DJ Premier's first collaborative group album since Gangstar. And it's with DJ Premier and Royce da 5'9" of Slaughterhouse. But this is the first album where DJ Premier has sampled only one artist, and that one artist happens to be me. So when I found out about this thing, I was, absolutely flattered and taken back, because I always say my top 3 hip-hop producers are Primo, RZA, and the third one's just open. I don't know who to put in that third space, But to be somebody that was raised by the revolutionary culture of hip hop, that learned so much from these dudes, to now be perceived as a luminary with these guys, it's something that is just insane. But to have your tracks exclusively sampled by one of your favorite hip-hop producers of all time, it's just hard to explain how that made me feel. I was talking to Oliver before we started, and I said there was a part of me that was a little scared, because I love Primo's work so much that if when I went to hear it, it was garbage, like, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? So I remember going to D&D Studios in New York, in the studio, and he played me the tracks, and I just couldn't believe it. It was one of those things where it was a moment in my life to hear one of my favorite producers take my music, make a new derivative version of it that is just something I've always dreamed of, because I am somebody that creates breaks. I create music that, like I said, is akin to the recording techniques of 68 to 73. And then to have one of the illest producers make hip-hop music from your own compositions is something that's just, like I said, it's just hard to put into words, but the Prime album drops on December 9th, and I'm telling you guys, it's straight Primo. Straight Primo. And also, one thing to add to that, one thing that I like that Brian does in his books is that he lets the audience know that these MCs, these hip-hop producers, they're composers, the great ones. They're really composers. There are people that make 10, 15 beats in a day. There's people that write one song and it takes them 3-4 days to produce it. The people that put the most work into their art at the end of the day are going to be at the top. And people like Primo, people like RZA, these are some of these luminaries that have just helped to elevate soul music with hip-hop. So I love the fact that Brian digs in deep to illustrate or illuminate the type of instruments that these people used. Because a sampler is an instrument. They also use organic instruments such as bass, guitar, sometimes live drums and all that stuff. But I love the fact that you have exposed to the masses what a lot of people have looked down on as just kids messing around. you know, so.
Thank you, Adrian. On your right, we have Mona Lisa Murray, who's here tonight. Who is a veteran DJ, veteran supporter, advocate. Garth Trinidad once called her both a hustler and the wire in the network, which I liked a lot. Every network needs that wire. So Mona Lisa, I wanted to ask you about, as someone who DJs both out live but also post mixes online. I was listening to some of your really fantastic work today. I'm just wondering, could you talk about, as a DJ, as a selector, as a mixer, some of these same issues in terms of the way a producer approaches a record, but as a DJ, what are some of the choices that you're making when you're putting mixes together? And does it change versus playing out in front of a crowd or assembling something at home or in the studio that goes online?
Well, it always changes per situation. I always like to play stuff that other people don't play. I mean, you can go to a club any night and hear any given list of songs. You can hear Check the Rhyme, you can hear Dwick, you can hear The World Is Yours, you can hear all kind of stuff. But I like to play stuff that people don't normally play because I feel like you said, I'm the wire in the network. I'm like an educator. So I feel like I want to teach people about stuff that they haven't heard before or that they don't hear that often or that they may not hear ever again or, things like that. As far as like breaks, like I learned about breaks from listening. I learned about breaks from people telling me, but I also learned from doing my own research. So I also like to play breaks for people that, that they may not have heard. I like to play stuff from other countries, stuff that you just don't hear all the time. I feel like I became a DJ because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to fill in the gap of the people that don't teach, educate people about certain things. So like for example, I grew up here in LA. So in LA we had like K-Day, we had Uncle Jam's Army, we had like our movements out here. But then in New York there's a DJ named Larry Levan who was one of the biggest, if not the biggest club DJ in New York City. And a lot of people in LA have no idea who Larry Levan is. They don't know his music. They don't know what he played. They don't know what he stood for. So sometimes when I DJ, I'll play Larry Levan's remixes or stuff that he played in his club. And people will be like, this song is great. I've never heard this before. And I'm like, that's what I went for. I went for you to hear this song that you never heard before. And a lot of the music that Larry played at the club he DJ'd at called Paradise Garage is a lot of the music that was sampled in the hip-hop songs that you hear today. A lot of Organized Confusion, a lot of Pete Rock stuff, a lot of Primo stuff, a lot of all those producers that came from New York all heard those records in their parents' house when, after they came from the club or whatever. They went to Paradise Garage, heard that music, and then their parents played it in the house. And then as those producers got older, they were like, hey, let me go sample that song that my parents used to play on the record player or whatever. So it all goes back to that. I like to play just different things that stand out, whether it's like a break that nobody's ever sampled before or a break that's been sampled but nobody ever plays the original. I just feel like that is what I do, and I feel like a lot of DJs that I look up to do that as well. They like to play breaks, they like to play stuff that people don't normally hear, and I think that's a really important part of bridging that gap too between what's going on today and what happened back in the day. A lot of people don't play certain songs that explain the difference between what went on back in the day and what goes on now.
So back to an idea that Brother Jay mentioned about chemistry. You don't want people biting your chemistry. So I wanted you to talk about chemistry on one of your mixes, the Mandala mix. Explain to us the chemistry that gets you to connect Poor Righteous Teachers, Aaliyah, George Benson, and Kenny G.
Okay, well, one of the things about that mix, I work at Amoeba Music in Hollywood, and it's a record store. So the record store, in there, we sell everything from jazz music to classical to experimental to, rock, funk, world, everything. So when I do my mixes in the store, I specifically do those mixes so that I expand around the whole perimeter of the store. I'm not going to put country or regional Mexican music in there unless it, unless it fits. Unless it fits.
2014,
if it fits, I will do it. If it fits, I'll do it. But I don't always do that. So in putting the Shaquille, the Poor Righteous Teachers, and the Aaliyah, that was representing, okay, I'm going to start in the hip-hop corner. I'm going to move over to soul. I kind of moved around the store geographically to hit all the corners. And so moved in the middle, and then I played some soul and some funk in the middle of that. Yeah. And then when I got to the George Benson and the Kenny G, a lot of people don't know that's Kenny G, by the way. So I'm glad that you picked that up.
I don't know what that says about
people.
me.
People think it's
Yeah.
people think it's just a regular funk record, and both the George Benson record and the Kenny G record were both produced by Kashif, who is in the soul section. So it all correlates. And then at the end of that same mix, I go into house music, but then I hit the Jungle Brothers because the Jungle Brothers had house music that they did, and then I went back into the house music and ended it with that. But there's also some electronica in the middle. But I do it to educate everybody about what we sell in the store in case somebody comes up and is like, hey, what's this song? I'll be like, oh, it's this song, you can find it right over there. Okay, this song you can find right over there, and this song you can find right over there. So those mixes, the mandalas are specifically done to teach people about what we sell in the store.
Are you noticing anything, especially with, let's say, within the hip-hop section itself at Amoeba? And I know Amoeba is an anomaly in terms of record buying, but are you noticing anything about right now how people are buying hip hop? Is it different? Okay, or are they buying hip hop? But kind of consumption habits, are they changing at all? And have they changed since the '90s? Let's say
they've changed a lot. A lot of people don't buy physical products anymore. But the thing that irks me about today is that people are like, hip hop is dead. Hip hop is not dead. Hip hop is alive and thriving. A lot of your favorite artists that you're like, people be on Facebook like, whatever happened to Planet Asia? I'm like, Planet Asia puts an album out every week, like almost every week. His whole bin is full of CDs. I'm like, what are you talking about? Just, all they have to do is Google's at your, you can Google people and you can see what they have out. But a lot of people won't come in the store even like to look around. There's a lot of people that I used to work with in the music business, and they'll come in and look around like, oh, you guys still have stuff in here. I'm like, it hasn't gone anywhere. All the records that you guys love from the 90s are still in print. You can still get Mecca and the Soul Brother. You can still get the Artifacts between a rock and a hard place. You can still get Public Enemy, their whole catalog. You can still get DJ Quick's whole catalog. You can still get anything, almost everything. Like there's only like a few obscure titles that you can't get, but even they come in used. We still get them, you know what I'm saying? So it's very much alive, but now there's also been a resurgence of cassettes. We have a cassette section in front now. I mean, we always had used cassettes, but now we have brand new cassettes. Old releases being released on cassette. They just released Donuts, Mad Villain, other things for Cassette Store Day, which was something that we hadn't heard of until this year, and we participated like, okay, cool. But yeah, people are coming in like, looking for newer stuff, looking for older stuff. There's young kids that'll be like, can you show me something that came out in the 90s that I should own? And I'm like, hell yeah. Let's go to De La Soul. Let's go to Tribe. Let's go to Souls of Mischief. Let's go get this stuff, But then there's also people that are like, back in the day, people are like, okay, I want to hear some new stuff. Like, give me something new. I don't want anything that's going to drive me crazy. I don't want anything that's going to be too turned up or whatever. And I'll just give them like I usually start with Kendrick Lamar, and then I'll go to Kev Brown, and then I'll go to the next hot thing that's going that everybody's into. But it's still alive. Products is still moving. We're still doing in stores and everything.
Cool. And last but not least on our panel, we've got Brian Cross, B+. Brian, who is the author of a classic book in the canon of hip-hop writing. It's not about a salary, it's about a reality from 1993 that is still out there, right? We need a reissue. We need a reissue. But for those of you who want to know anything about the history of hip-hop and the prehistory of hip-hop in Los Angeles and on the West Coast, that is your one-stop guide to get you going. Brian is also an accomplished and celebrated photographer and visual artist who is finishing up his first full career spanning photo collection soon, which we're very excited about. Brian, because you've done a lot of work following hip-hop, kind of following the international trails of hip-hop, let's say, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about, back to that kind of historical question and back to this idea of connecting dots across genres, across styles, is, one of the things when you peel back the layers about the history of the production of records is you do get that trail of unexpected sources and unexpected historical linkages. You've done work in Colombia and Brazil, lots of other places. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of role of internationalism in making this?
I mean, I'm also Irish, which I guess is international too.
Yes, right? It's true. It's true.
Well, I mean, the trail for me is funny because I remember listening to Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock in Ireland in like 1988 or 89, and I had never heard Think by Lynn Collins, and I just assumed that was Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock making that music, and I had no idea about sampling, and I really had no idea about funk, soul, jazz. You know, Irish radio at that time was, you know, there was one national station, and you'd be lucky to hear like some rock and roll, maybe. I used to listen to Radio Luxembourg. I used to bring the radio in and put it under my pillow, and you could hear like the British top 40. But I lived on the west of Ireland. We didn't even get the BBC. So I really, you know, it's through hip hop. It's through peeling back the layers that I know about John Coltrane, or I know about George Clinton, or Sun Ra, or Madlib, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, or Lee Scratch Perry, for that matter. But to expand it out a little bit, you know, what I also know a little bit about is that people have been peeling the labels off records in Jamaica since the Second World War, and people have been peeling the labels off records in Colombia since at least the 50s, if not longer, peeling the labels off 78s. You know what I'm saying? So the way I was trying to think about it, I was like, what is Josh talking about hip-hop as methodology? What am I going to be asked in this? After I've eaten these pears, what's required?
Priorities, Brian.
Yeah, right. What's going to be required? And in certain respect, I feel like that, you know, the thing for me is that the technology somehow was already in place, and what hip-hop is, and that moment, and that the way that Jay described it so beautifully, that sort of innocent moment. I've often thought of it also as that moment when a lot of people that I love and admire got struck by the same lightning. You know, because very often, if you've met people who grew up in New York in the 70s and early 80s, they speak with the kind of passion about this culture that feels like they were. I used to say that about Ramel Z. I was like, man, he got struck by the lightning bad. I mean, he had the spirit was in him, you know. But you know, the thing was, for me, that is a kind of naming involved. And I mean a naming from below. I don't mean some journalist goes to the Bronx and decides to call this thing hip-hop. I mean, it's a kind of coming together of a certain set of technologies that existed both within this country and outside this country, in that, you know, in those communities. And that's where all this wonderful information and methodology, right down to, you know, I mean, Mona Lisa said it very nicely. I don't DJ, I play records. But I always have that same, I always carry that same sort of pedagogic or educational aspect into it when I do it. You know, I want you to know that this is where it came from, that thing that you hear on the radio or that you're listening to in your car came from this. And there's a kind of ancestor worship aspect to this thing, which is really important. And I don't know, now I'm rambling, but.
In the work that you've done abroad, particularly, let's say in South America, throughout Latin America, what have you learned, I guess, about, or has your understanding of hip hop as a culture, as a sensibility, changed because of the digging and the research you've done in Brazil, in Colombia?
I mean, obviously, Brazil is a crazy one. I could be here for a long time talking about Brazil, but just a couple of things. In brief, the notion of freestyling in couplets in a battle environment has been going on in Brazil since the late 1500s, that we know of. Okay, it's called embolada or coco. It still exists in the northeast of Brazil, although you'll see musicians on the street in Sao Paulo. There's a great movie about it called Saudade do Futuro. You should totally see it. And if you, I can spell it. And if you want to just go look on YouTube, just look up Caju e Castanha. Those are two artists you can check out.
That's harder than the title. Yeah.
No Portuguese speakers here? Anyways, but what I'm saying is that as a practice, this is something that's existed for a very long time. And then the other thing I would say about going to Brazil for us was that the trippy thing. I remember when we went there, we were part of this group of people that all went there together, and part of the deal was that we're supposed to, some of the cats were supposed to DJ there. And I remember we arrived picking people up at the airport, and we see Madlib, and I was like, "Yo, where's your records, dude? This is before Otis was playing CDs. Say, man, you're supposed to DJ like it's been 4 days at this big club with a lot of people. Where's your records?" oh man, I'm gonna just buy some records. And it was a really wonderful thing where that dude went hard. Like, his knowledge of Brazilian music was so intense that he was able to go to the store, go really hard, and play Brazilian music back to Brazilian people in a way that, like, it really was a proper cultural moment. And certainly there was, you know, it's not that there wasn't Brazilian diggers at that time. There was, but it was something different to see somebody come from outside and find a bunch of breaks and rock them back to Brazilians. And for me, that's the message of the Bronx in the early '70s. Really is that you can there is this sort of local, regional you know, there's flavor everywhere, man. There's breaks in Irish music, man. You know what I mean? People have, you know, it exists. You know, it sounds funny. Thin Lizzy, it's not that funny. Thin Lizzy, okay. You know what I'm saying? But it's the sensibility. I think Cut always says, you know, it's not a thing. It's how we play it. You know, it's like it's not a thing you go to the store to the section for. It's how you play those records, whether it be Kenny G or whether it be Thin Lizzy. And you know, so to go into Brazil and to see that sort of transpire was something really, really special. Especially in a situation, I have to say, like, at that moment, hip hop. I always say hip hop is like Guinness. Sometimes it don't travel so good. You know what I'm saying? And you know, there are times and there are places where hip hop is a sign of privilege. To have the correct record or the real new era hat as opposed to the bootleg one is a sign of a certain kind of privilege. Not so much here, you know, it's easy to go, you know, the trappings, so to speak, of the culture, it's easy enough to go get it here, but I'm talking in places where it is a bit difficult. And Brazil was like that at one time. But to go back into those places and to flip it the other way around and go like, hey, you know, check out this Gal Costa record that's in your grandparents' or your parents' record collection. Now here's the hot hip-hop producer playing it. You know, it was kind of it was great. Anyways.
So that idea of, you know, Chemist's idea that it's not the thing, it's not the object, but it's what you do with it, you know, how you play. That comes back to, yes, that clumsy word that's on our flyer of methodology. But that's also, we have to use that word if we have an event at USC. I'm just letting you know. That's part of the contract.
How was I thinking?
It's part of the contract.
It's Mimesis in San Diego.
That's right. Yeah. Aren't you glad you're here? Yeah. But that idea, right? That's kind of what I was getting at. Is this idea of, you know, how do you play something, and that so much of what Brian uncovers in this book is movement. It's about people doing things before the finished product exists, right? And so I wanted to maybe just get general comments from the panel about what do you guys think about that idea about hip hop, you know, as a practice, as something that we do, and can it teach us about things that aren't musical? Can hip hop be a kind of way of thinking about larger life issues and social issues? Oliver.
I write about this in the intro of my book about the ways in which when you write a history, it's like a mix, right? You're taking a bunch of disparate moments in time and finding a way to order them in a way that becomes legible to someone. In other words, you're taking a moment here, you're connecting with a moment there. That's about building segues. It's about making a whole, something that feels cohesive at the end of it, but it's really made of the things that you choose to talk about and the things you choose to leave out. Anytime I'm getting ready to go out to DJ, I'm going through, whether it's a digital crate or a physical crate, I'm picking out what do I want to put in the order that I want to put it. And to me, I always think about writing, especially writing a history, is very much like putting a mix together. I don't think I would have come to that analogy if not for sort of having a foot in hip-hop before I ever became a scholar. And I think it's a sort of a valuable way of thinking. We think of history as if it's already been written for us, if it was just out there in nature and we just picked it up and look, there's history. No, history is someone has to make an argument, this is what you need to know about what happened, when, where, and how. That, to me, is exactly how a mix functions.
Cool.
Also, something with hip-hop, I mean, hip-hop is just an amalgamation of sound. It's all perspective, because hip hop is the only type of music that could bring in opera, country, jazz, R&B to make a brand new track from a unilateral perspective. Just like B Plus was saying, you know, there's Irish breaks. I mean, there's Japanese breaks, there's Brazilian breaks, there's American breaks, and hip hop's perspective of just what is funky to that producer and or MC is something that was never really done before. And it's also based on this culture of just the DJ, of mixing, just mixing different things together to make something brand new that was never done before. This history wasn't just sitting around, just like Oliver said. It's something that was made on the spot. And something also about Brian's book that really hits me is it's hard not to think of history as something that was just predestined or that was just supposed to happen. You know? I mean, just even reading like on People's Instinctive Travels, or just, I mean, there's so many classic albums like 36 Chambers, or you know, like I'm reading interviews in your book that deal with people I actually have a relationship with. And I have my stories from them, and I have the stories in your book. And your book is so thorough. I mean, nothing ever, you know, everything always pans out. But it's always amazing to me to talk to these people and to realize that they didn't know that they'd be successful. And one thing that really hit me last week is that Ali Shaheed Muhammad from A Tribe Called Quest, he put up a letter on Instagram last week. And it's a letter that he wrote when he was 17. And it talked about how when he grows up, he wants to make music and be successful making music. And when he was 17, 18, I mean, that was the time, you know, that was Jungle Brothers was hot. I mean, that was the time when they didn't really, Tribe Called Quest didn't really know if they were going to be anything. But to see that these people that have reached such a plateau based on just music didn't know that they would even get there at a certain point. You know, it's amazing to me because, like Oliver said, history isn't laying around. It's just something that just happens. But it's hard not to look at it like that, you know? Because being somebody that was just always a fan, this stuff was just predestined. Seeing this dude on Yo MTV Raps, you know, you were just supposed to be on there. You know, I mean, you were just supposed to be chosen just to be on, you know? I was just supposed to have your records. But then to discover that there was actually a story behind that, and there was hard work behind that, and there was the fact that you guys had this connection in New York of just moving around with people that were just like-minded trying to make it. Then you start realizing, well, wait a minute, how many people didn't make it? You know? How many people got locked up or killed? You know, I mean, just something also about this book is the fact that you're from Boston, talking about Boston. The Ed O.G., that chapter, obviously that's a long chapter for a reason. Yeah. But I always heard about how Boston was racist. I always heard about it, but I never really had anybody that I knew that was close to me to talk to me about Boston. Mm-hmm. But just those stories in the 80s, yep. You know? And then talking to these hip-hop icons just about New York at that time. And then you listen to hip-hop from the late 80s, early 90s. You hear about, you know, what you guys was talking about and how much New York has changed now. I mean, the book is just, it's crazy. From a historical perspective, from an artistic perspective, it's something that before I even knew you, I was telling people, you need to get this book. So, I mean, thank you for writing the book. I know I'm going on, but it's a very important book historically, for real.
Take Adrian on the road with you.
My new publicist.
It's a living blurb. This is great.
I know, I do appreciate, I mean, that means a lot,
yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I don't even know if this is working. But, so the one thing I wanted to say is about kind of the methodology and what hip-hop is about specifically is, before I became kind of more immersed in hip-hop and a big fan, except that what punk was and what the early hip-hop stuff was, and I mean early, even going up through the early 90s, was figuring out what you had available to you, whether that was ways to record, different people you could perform with and do this and that with, and how to make the most of it. Because no one in hip-hop and no one in punk was ever kind of handed, you know, $500,000 and like an unlimited use of a 96-track studio. I mean, that's not the way it worked. And honestly, a lot of indie artists, that's still the same way. They're still doing everything they can with what is available to them. So it's really about taking what you have and not kind of bitching and moaning about, oh, I don't have anything, and, you know, oh, I can't do this, and why am I gonna, woe is me. It's just like, nah. I mean, the early Boogie Down Productions stuff was done at a $25 an hour studio that, you know, KRS-One scraped together $50. So he had 2 hours, and that was it. And then once that was gone, I mean, he was living in like in an abandoned meat locker in a factory. Like, so it wasn't like anyone handed anything to him. He just, when you're an artist, you can't help but create. Like, it's just a burning, and I don't, you know, I create my own way. Everyone here creates in their own way. Some people as artists, some people as journalists, DJs, but that's kind of, I found, and there are definitely a lot of parallels too in things coming out of Brazil and Colombia and Jamaica. Just, that's really what music is about, is when you kind of get to the core of it, it's not about, and this is also why I generally like dealing with people's earliest records, because I think that's when the creativity is, in a lot of ways, at its highest, because you have to be creative. If you only have a certain amount of money, there's only so much you can do, and so it's basically, it's what you create with that. So I find very few albums that have come out since Boogie Down Productions' Criminal Minded, which was done for almost $0, that sound better than it in the way that it connects with audiences. And that's really what it's all about. It's about how you connect with the people you're trying to connect with. It's how you express yourself. And it doesn't matter if you have an unlimited budget or you have almost no money. If you're an artist and you're an innovator, you figure out a way to do it. And that's really what it's about to me.
But just to add on to what you were saying, also, people have to realize that hip-hop was looked at as a, I'm not even going to say a culture, but a form of music that was not supposed to survive. So these albums that were being released were viewed as just albums that were just trendy, kind of, you know? I mean, just kind of like people just doing stuff for fun. It wasn't real, you know? And then when things started changing and it started becoming popular culture, I was with Fab Five Freddy a week ago, and we was talking about just the dawn of Yo MTV Raps. And a lot of people know that when MTV started, it was like what he called it was cable apartheid. You know, I mean, there was just no black people unless you was Prince or Michael Jackson. And even had to get to that point. But key was, Yo MTV Raps was like it was the highest rated show at that time, and it just couldn't be denied that there was something about this burgeoning culture that was happening. And it's just amazing how the book documents and takes you through this journey of this culture being recognized as something palpable, something tangible, something real, something that was going to be around for a long time.
Something that just occurred to me. Yes, the studio costs $25 an hour. Scott LaRock's ears, however, you can't put a price on Scott LaRock's ears. You can't put a price on the skill base that Scott LaRock is bringing to the table, or KRS at that moment. And
Said G.
And the corrective here, I think, is I think it's a really important thing to understand the technology and to understand that hip hop itself produces a kind of a value in the same way as hip hop produces a kind of history. But the bigger thing for me is that hip hop actually produces knowledge, and in a whole other series of ways than Western thought allows us to think about it. And that's kind of the important thing, and that's the kind of $50 gazillion question in the room is, once we get into notions of, just think about how body knowledge has been transformed by hip hop. Just think about those YouTube videos you've seen of kids in very far away places doing incredible moves, or flip it the other way, King Sunny Ade saying that Africa Bambaataa stole breakdancing from his dancers at a WOMAD, at a festival in Paris in 1982. But the notion is that hip hop produces a kind of knowledge, a kind of diasporic knowledge, I think. A knowledge that has to do with improvisation, a knowledge that has to do with thinking history in different ways. And it does all that while we're having a good time. And that's a really, really, that's what's up.
Edutainment.
I wanted to say something along the lines of where we're going. The hunger that we have when we start this music is what guides us. It's part of that innocence that we spoke of. The audience gets attached to that. When we grow and get used to the tour bus and the lifestyle and so on, it's hard for the audience to accept our growth and our next level. It's deep when you get a bill back and you're not getting paid your full record because you sampled 50 different artists. You know what I'm saying? Because, where the brother is where I had to go. I had to start creating my own breaks. It's no longer fun to go to the record store anymore to find your favorite and make something. The mixtape became the outlet now. The experimental ground. Like, I want to do something, I don't want to be taxed for it. Because you see Mo D go down, and Biz Markie and Naughty by Nature is getting sued, and all these other people getting sued for breaks, and when they want to pudge you for more money, they threaten your record and so on. So you get the hunger and that energy that you're excited to do hip hop with, it dies. You know what I'm saying? Now you become an enemy to the artists that you used to dig through the crates with. That's now your enemy. Then you go watch a Dre or a Puffy buy them out, and they skip over you. And you might have been creating along the same lines as a George Clinton and not saying hoes and bitch on this. You might have been talking about the mothership and continuing the message. I always wanted to reach out to the elders of the music to say, y'all can save hip hop, because lending your catalogs, refreshing them, you know what I'm saying, and making a new deal with the artist. Now, the third party, that corporate wheel that jerked us all, is out of the picture. So for you to bring that original audience back to this new audience, if the artist is still sharp, it's a whole different market.
But I think that's what's so dope about what Adrian's doing, and like the Menahan Street Band out of Daptone in Brooklyn, is that now it's making it easier, so you don't have to, like, you can call Adrian up and be like, hey, I want to sample your stuff. Are you going to kill me on these clearances? And it's like, no, I mean, I'm not going to give them to you for free, but we can work on this. And then you don't have to.
Look at those shoes, man. He's killing them. He's killing them on the clearances.
And he's going to look good. He's going to look good along the way. But I mean, I think that's important. And Brother Jay, I think that's really crucial in what kind of the way it's swinging back around. Because, I mean, the live stuff that Dre did, throughout the 90s and early 2000s, that never really meant much to me musically. Like, I respected what he was doing. I understood why he had stuff replayed. But those people who were replaying the stuff, it was just kind of real plastic to me. So kind of Adrian and like the Daptone crew are kind of bringing this grit and the original feel back and doing it in an original way too. So it's not just covering things, not just kind of directly copying them, but making their own new genre out of it, that's an incredible new development that's happened.
To me, Dre did something deep where he showed us what we were cheating on. For me to go in to sample Sly Stone and take his sweet spot of his record and go make a hit, I'm cheating. But for him to get a full band in and play every element was where we should have been from the first place. That's why he is a billionaire, and a lot of other cats are still paying a bill. You feel me? We should have been studying music. We should have been doing like Curtis Blow was doing back in the days. He was making those breaks.
Yeah. Pumpkin, Sugar Hill.
Yeah, he was making that. All of them came from live band. It wasn't until it was like, yo, we can cheat. Loop this way, use these 8 tracks and make it like this. And we were practicing from the pause taping. You know, you stack your cassettes up and you run it through this multi-channel mixer, you know what I'm saying? And you're trying to make sense of things, and you go into the lab for that $25, you got one take. And this is reel to reel. It ain't no press this off. You mess up on reel to reel, you got to roll all the way back to the beginning. You know, it's time taking. So you got 2 hours. You're sharper than ever. All your senses are up, homie, because you can't blow that demo money. That could be a single deal, 5 G's. You know, they were throwing money around. that could be 10 G's back then for 2 songs, the A and the B side. Come on, man, you was golden.
Mona Lisa, I want to give you a chance to get in here on this.
Yeah, I actually did want to speak on this part because I always tell everybody that I talk to about hip-hop that the reason why I love jazz music now is because of A Tribe Called Quest. Now, my grandfather used to hang out on Central Avenue. His best friend was T-Bone Walker. He used to hang out with Fats Waller. Those were his homies. He used to hang out with Eddie Harris. But I didn't understand the kind of jazz he listened to because it was too busy. It was da-da-da-da-da-da. I was like, there's no rhythm. There's no beat. Like, I can't get into this. I can't dance to it. It's too crazy. I didn't like it. But then when the Tribe Called Quest did their first album, when they did People's Instinctive Travels, and I heard the Donald Byrd and the Roy Ayers, I'm like, what is this? And my uncle's like, oh, that's Roy Ayers. That's Donald Byrd. Here, listen to this, listen to that. They're giving me records, and I'm like, this is jazz? I like this. This is jazz. Okay. So I got educated from those samples. And every record that I listened to from back in the day, every time I heard something, I would find out what the sample was, and I'd end up buying that artist's whole catalog. There's a singer that most of you probably never heard of named DJ Rogers. Common sampled him a couple times, and his R&B stuff is amazing. He's got like 6, 7, 8 albums maybe. I got his whole catalog just from hearing different people sample him and flip his music. So it's like, I think it's sad that the artists don't realize that even though they're penalizing hip-hop for sampling them, there's a lot of fans that have actually bought their original music because of hearing somebody sample it. So it's you know, goes back to education.
You can't do that.
Yeah, Brian.
One interesting thing about Brazil, I gotta say, that really was an interesting learning experience for me, was that the cats that built the Zulu Nation in Brazil were old sort of funketeers. You know, they were the cats that went to welcome James Brown when he went to Brazil the first time out. And so the kind of fissure, the kind of generational break that exists somehow between George Clinton and X-Clan, or, you know, DJ Rogers and Mad Villain, doesn't really exist once you leave the United States. And for me, that was a very interesting thing. And for me, that's partially the industry. It's partially the sort of invention of a kind of new kind of youth culture, which would be a kind of MTV thing. You know, MTV, Yo MTV Raps, as a format, as for what was allowed in that space, that little space that they opened up for people of color, wasn't enough space to be able to talk about important things like history. And well, that's what prompted me to make Keep in Time, for example. But you know, once you leave the United States, things pan out differently. Marketing doesn't play the same role in the way people receive the music. And so it's completely conceivable to listen to George Clinton followed by X-Clan, or DJ Rogers followed by Mad Villain, and it doesn't sound like this is your grandfather's music and this is your son's, you know, whatever. It doesn't really work that way. So it's quite, I mean, it's interesting to think about these things, because to me it is a kind of continuum. There are new things brought to the table, but there's a lot of things that are continued as well. You know, people didn't start talking on records in 1972. People were talking on records a lot longer before that, you know, so.
Just one more thing to add. I got to disagree with you on one thing, because you have to realize that your generation of music, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't know. jazz. I always say that too. Tribe Called Quest, they actually made me like jazz. You have to understand that all the sampled music that you guys were, all the sample-based music that you guys were creating was something brand new that was never, ever done to that degree before. A new sound was created, and that sound is what represented the subculture. If you guys were playing all live instruments, it would not even be close to the same, you see? So when Dre started using live instruments to not have to pay on the master use side, he still had to pay publishing side, but on the master side, he was continuing the ideology or the or going with the evolution of just where this soul music was going. So imagine if James Brown was never sampled. How many people right now would know who James Brown is? Dude, I mean, but no, I mean, how many kids right now know who Frank Sinatra is? How many kids now know who James Brown is? You know, I mean, sampling is one of the most important. Sampling is one of the most important movements in soul music, straight up, because it opened doors. It opened people like me to a world of music. I would not care at all about Israeli music if it wasn't for sampling, because it opened the door to me. I said, "Oh my, there's music that is that good, that out there." Because of the sample perspective that hip hop created.
But you're not sampling now.
No, I'm not. No. I'm not sampling now because I learned from you guys. No. No. I learned how to find the sweet spot. You see, hip hop culture showed people what the sweet spot was in these breaks. That's a whole movement. The sweet spot. So
I'm saying it's a costly thing.
no, it's very costly, and you guys paid the cost. You paid the cost to be the boss. You know what I'm saying? But
Dre is the boss.
Dre is the boss. But honestly, like Dre.
I'd like to see Set G and Ultramagnetic have gotten the opportunity that Dre did, because I felt they did as good. I was just saying, as we were discussing here, I would like to see Ultramagnetic have gotten the same opportunities with the same equipment and live band and things of that nature to see what kind of breaks they were doing. You know what I'm saying? We might have seen what this brother's doing now in the early 90s, which would have been a different thing. Imagine if we were all musicians banging it like that instead of just cheating. Now cats are making beats on their watch and their phone and all kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? With no music knowledge. And mess around and slip through and get to the right head, you got a #1 hit, and you have no history, no dues, no nothing paid. That's where I'm going. I don't want to, disagree and all of that. I'm just saying that sampling costs us a level of knowledge. Now when cats come out, you see a new artist, they're playing violin with their foot, they're singing. You got the vocoder thing going on. They got all kind of stuff, happening.
Right. But also, the stuff that Dre was having live instruments being played with, he wasn't opening up chords. He wasn't doing a lot of music where he was opening up chords and doing stuff. He was basically he was going.
He played the sweet spot.
He played the sweet spot. Yes. But the thing is, if that sweet spot was never purveyed to the masses, I'm telling you, like music, I know personally, at least for myself, it wouldn't be the same. You know what I'm saying?
I think I admire him more because he let go. I was saying, I admire Dre because he let go. He did a certain time frame because early stuff was sampling. There was a lot of heavy sampling, NWA, all that kind of thing. But he let go and started to produce. And that's when we should have started to do that. But we were hollering, hanging on to analog, this white sound on your record that's supposed to be making it more live or more powerful. That's fable, man. You know what I'm saying? If you know how to EQ your music, you do your homework, man, you can make a thumping composition. You know what I'm saying? The battle of analog and digital is something that producers go through all day, in the lab. But at the end of the day, the clean sound, capturing the feel of the music that we sampled is the key. It matters the skill of the person that's putting it down. Just like with the DJ, I can give you 100 songs, You can't make a playlist like Sis. You can't make a playlist like Bismarck. It matters that still that groove and that feel and the connection to those rhythms, regardless.
And what's at the core of this debate, though, also, this conversation, is really about intellectual property, right? Because I mean, you both are in support of the exact same thing, which is sampling as a sensibility. Which is what Brian was saying, that about lived knowledge. So you can go back to listen to Frank Sinatra records, and he's sampling. He's not actually using pre-recorded pieces of music in new ways, but there's interpolations of other songs, right? So, and that's throughout the history of non-recorded music as much as recorded music. So I think it becomes about the kind of industry of music as a commodity, which is a big part. And Joanna, whose class we're in, wrote a whole book about this, wherever Joanna is, wrote a whole book about this issue as well. So I think it's very interesting how the industry side of it gets left out, because you're both talking about what Brian said, which is about knowledge, and the way that lived knowledge continues to be cycled and recycled through musical performance of all different types. We've got an incredible group of folks here, so I want to have some time for questions and comments. We actually have the director of hip-hop at KXSC, Max Darty, who's over there, who runs something here, much to the point, runs a whole series of events on the USC campus called Sample Showcase. Ever since I've known Max since he was a student here, he's come into my office every week and to my colleague Taj Frazier's office with his laptop and a library of songs. And he said, do you know where this sample comes from? Do you know where this sample comes from? Have you heard this song? What is that song? What is it? You were trying to figure one out the other day. So I was wondering, Max, if you had a question for the panel about sampling, about these issues. I want to cede the floor to you for the first question.
Let's put you on the spot.
You're doing the work.
Way to put me on the spot.
You're doing the work.
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone who is here on the panel. But I guess this is an open question to everyone. What is it, I guess each individual can answer, when you hear a song, what is it about certain samples that just hit our eardrum the right way? For example, I use Pete Rock's sample of Ahmad Jamal for The World Is Yours. And I've listened to that song hundreds and hundreds of times. And that particular part, that Pete Rock sample, I'm like, even if I had never heard The World Is Yours, I would definitely use that. So what makes a sweet spot a sweet spot?
Let me, because I've been biting my tongue with my man over here. Like the thing is, I just got to be honest. Like the people that know me know exactly what I'm about to say right now. But like, there's nothing better than analog recording. Whether you're recording something brand new or old, it's just like. I'm a chemist, humbly speaking. Like, I've studied this I have a 2-inch 16-track, all analog studio, hardware based. Analog versus digital, there is a difference, but it all depends on the type of music you're making. If you're making something that's supposed to sound like it's between 68 to 73, and you're using a computer to make it, you're not going to make it, and you're not going to get that Ahmad Jamal sound. It's the player. And it's the way that it's recorded. Breaks, the breaks that we love, a lot of these breaks, the composition's not always that great. The playing's not always that great. It's the fact that it's that color. You can't emulate that color. And this is something I do every day. I wake up at 5 in the morning every day and do this. Can't emulate, at least yet. You can't do it yet. There will definitely be a time where it's the same. But it all depends on the kind of music that you're making. The stuff that Dre was doing, that was all on 2-inch. If it wasn't on 2-inch, it would not sound the same, straight up. The reason why people look at me and say the things they say about me, a big part of it is because of my science of sound. It's the stuff I use to create this sound. When I did the movie Black Dynamite, I had to make a movie soundtrack that sounded like it came out in '74. If I would have done that with the drum machine and plugins, it would not have sounded the same. But people that don't have sensitive dog ears to that stuff would have said, oh yeah, that's cool. It sounds like it's like funky, like a 70s, like if I did a wah-wah or like a rolling hi-hat. But it's so much deeper than that. It's so much deeper than that. And there's an energy in that sound outside of just the playing. I could bring out so many records that these people can't play for shit. They suck. but the way that it sounds. Imagine the Beatles was recorded on Pro Tools. Imagine how that would sound right now.
Y'all wouldn't know the difference. You wouldn't know the difference.
But going back to what you said, obviously Ahmad Jamal is ridiculous. But to get that sound, something you talked about, something that was in your book, the sampling of, I forget what song, but Premier had 2 copies. You know what I'm talking about.
Static?
Yes. He had 2 copies. He had the one that was messed up, that just had all the static on it, and he had the clean record. And he chose to sample the one with the static because he liked the energy it gave him. These were 2 analog records. And as soon as I read that, I went to listen to it. And I was like, holy shit, there's a ton of static on there. But he made that choice. But he made that choice to be different just to do it. You know what I'm saying? So it's all about what the energy that's captured gives you. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to recreate things if you don't understand the science behind it.
Well,
you know, I'm sorry. I just get.
I thought you only had opinions on the basketball court.
I know, man. I know. Another thing is that, like, a lot of people say, like, you know, hip hop is not like it once was in the 90s. Like, we need to go back to the 90s. When I tell people that I stopped listening to hip hop after 97, it's not that I want to hear people doing rhymes like they're Das Effects or doing whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just wanted to hear music that spoke to the subculture that I came from. It's the energy that was captured on those records. Something that Ghostface said to me when I was on tour with him after the 12 Reasons to Die. People used to hit him up and say, yo, why don't you make music like, you know, the old Wu-Tang stuff or this or that? Like, and he would say to people, well, people just don't do that anymore. They don't know how to do it anymore. And this is before we made our album. I said, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. People have to understand the science and what it took to make that and to capture a certain energy that you want to capture. After that point, he stopped saying that. On the new Wu-Tang album, I produced on the new Wu-Tang album. I don't know if I should say this, but there's a part of me that did not like some of the things that Wu-Tang did post-97. Okay?
I don't think you're alone in that.
Okay, but there's two reasons. One is sound and one is energy. Okay? Just sonically, when RZA went Bobby Digital, RZA he loves new things. He just loves to get new things, you know, and he just loves new beat machines, new this, new that, new that, new that. And he loves digital stuff. But why did we like Wu-Tang so much? The dirt behind it. It was an energy that he captured in the dirt and how he did it. So in producing the new Wu-Tang album, which I think is pretty good, it goes from the dirt all the way to clean. And when you listen to this album comes out December 9th, listen to the dirt all the way to the clean. And then you'll hear the difference of what analog does to digital. Not to say that, I mean, it's a subjective thing. I just love analog. You know, but if I was producing something for Britney Spears, why would I use tape? Because that's not the sound that she's supposed to have. It's absolutely subjectively preference. But when I did a Delphonics album, I'm not going to record the Delphonics album I didn't record that on Pro Tools because we didn't like Delphonics because of just the composition. We liked what Tom Bell did. We liked the production that they had at that time. See what I'm saying? So it's how you capture that energy and sound.
You know that, like, next week you're getting a call from Britney's camp asking for you to produce a record on tape.
I don't even want to let you know the calls I've been getting.
All right.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, and then I want to get it back to the audience.
Okay, so answering his question, I tend to dig in the store a lot, and what I used to do when I had a lot more time on my hands, I mean, I've been listening to hip-hop for 20, 25, 30 years, and I know what I like to hear, and I know a sound when I hear it. So I used to find breaks and samples all the time. And I would call my favorite producers and be like, hey, come get this record. I have this record at the store. You need to come sample. And they'd be scared. Exactly. But they be like, I'm scared. I don't want to sample anything else. I got somebody tried to sue me for sampling this, sampling that. I don't want to come get it. Other people would come get them. But it's really all about what your ears, what you want to hear. Like, you'll hear it. If there's a break for you to get, if there's a break for you to sample, you'll hear it. And if you have that artistic nature, you'll know what to do with it. I mean, I've never produced a record in my life. People want me to do it, but I don't have the time yet. I may soon, I don't know. But it's anything, just like listening to being a DJ and playing a long disco record and finding a break in that. It's the same thing. It's like when you hear it, you'll know it, and you'll know exactly what you want to do with it if it's in your heart.
Question, yes, right there.
Hi, I want to know what you feel like the relationship is between a journalist and an MC now. I feel like before, journalists kind of used to be like the gatekeepers, especially with like the reliance on good reviews and stuff like that. So what do you feel like the relationship is now, and like what is the role of a journalist?
I mean, I'm not like an active journalist right now. I'm kind of, as I think I alluded to before, I was never really very good at making an excellent living doing that. So, but I mean, I think the journalist's role now is the same. And in a way, it's actually, there's a little bit of a double-edged sword with kind of people being able to do things on social media, to blog on large or small blogs. And it's very democratic in a way, and that anyone can kind of say anything, and it has the potential of getting out there. Whereas back in the 80s or the 90s, you know, you had to kind of be doing stuff on the source, or, you know, you had to have more. There weren't as many places where you could be heard as a journalist. So, but I hope that some of the kind of younger bloggers out there take the role seriously, because it's not just, oh, everyone look at me, I'm going to give you an opinion that's just kind of what I think, and you know, or I'll say something really provocative just because I know that everyone will start tweeting about it. Like, that's just stupid. Like, that's not actually journalism. That's just kind of, I don't know what that is, but that's really not what journalism is supposed to be, in my opinion at least. Journalists are supposed to, in the same way that DJs are. I really liked what Mona Lisa was saying, in that you're supposed to teach people. You're supposed to, you are kind of still the gatekeeper if you're doing it correctly, in that you know generally a little bit, probably a little bit more than the people you're reaching. Hopefully you don't come across as like a know-it-all and talking down to people and being condescending, but you are kind of supposed to say, I listen to a lot of music. There's a lot of stuff out there, and I've listened to it, and this is the stuff that I think is the best that's out there. So that's really, I think, the role of when journalism can be powerful and effective. I don't know, what else? What do you think, Jay?
I was going to say, I think a lot of journalists are bored because these artists have no content. You know what I'm saying? I think they've run out of things to ask them, you know, because they present like a thin wall of, you know, outside of, yo, my record's coming out June such and such and whoop-de-whoop. There's nothing to build on. There's no movements. There's no, you know, there's no positive agenda. You know, you're going to see a lot of journalists become like him, to start writing books to say, at least let me cash out, you know, with some honor after doing all of this homework.
I don't know about the cash out part, but...
Well, you know what I'm saying? I mean, to get something for your time. You know what I'm saying? Because you've had all this patience, you take all these appointments, these artists come, and, you know, 5 out of 20 have something to say. You know what I'm saying? And that gets whack. And that's to remind a lot of people, if you're going to get into artistry, have content. You know what I'm saying? I'm glad my phone still rings, because I know what they're calling for. They're calling because I got 10 artists down here with nothing to say. I need content. I need to draw intelligent grown folks who still like hip-hop. Everybody's not sitting with a Tootsie Pop waiting for Lil Wayne to come on. You feel me? There has to be some kind of maturity in this game. You feel me? So, you know, feed the journalists.
Awesome. I want to get Oliver to weigh in on this, because Oliver, you've been covering hip hop. I mean, in both eras, if you will.
Right, and I've actually written on the history of hip hop journalism. So I would say that when hip hop was young, I think a lot of critics and journalists thought their role was really to be defenders and cheerleaders, because they said hip hop was under attack by conservative elements and that they needed an advocate. But then when hip hop blew up really by the end of the 90s, I think that the role turned more into as a consumer guide. In other words, you have X amount of choices, what's your money's worth? I think these days, it's both a filtering mechanism because there's so much music out there. You just need someone to say, okay, I've listened to this stuff, so you don't have to. Maybe check this stuff out. What I think we need more of, though, is we need chroniclers. Because I think there is a lot of history that's being lost. I mean, look, Big Hank, who was one of the founding members of Sugar Hill Gang, passed away today. He was only in his 50s. I mean, this is not a person who's 100 years old. We are losing way too many people way too quickly without getting the full extent of their stories. And there's still a role, right? There's still a role for the cheerleader, for the consumer guide writer, for the filterer. But I think we really need more chroniclers. If anyone here out there is interested in writing and doing journalism, write histories, because I think that's the one thing we're missing, or we don't have enough of, except for people like Brian doing this kind of work.
But they're scared to. Someone should be scared to write. If you look at the condition of the music, there's no intelligence required. Someone's not going to sit and read a book. My brother's book has 500 pages. People don't have attention span past 3 minutes. And this is what a label will tell you. This is what a book place will tell you. They'll tell you to put a memoir out before you put out a content book, because they have to have the breakup, the comic book type of mentality when you're reading something of importance. You know what I'm saying? You can't get enough facts. A book would be 1,000 pages long to go into the details that are needed. You know what I'm saying? We have to raise the intelligence of the audience by feeding through this hip hop. You know what I'm saying? Make you research, make you think. That's the elder sense.
In the back.
The one thing I'll say just really quickly, though, about journalism is the good thing is there are a lot more chances for young journalists to, if you're doing good work, to get out there and be heard, because you can do it on your own.
Just unpaid, but that's cool.
It's unpaid, but everyone's, I don't know anyone who hasn't started out unpaid. I'm still unpaid pretty much, so.
In the back.
All right, how you doing? My name is Elder Sensei from the Artifacts.
Peace, God. What's up?
I just want to ask a question to the panel real quick, because I know why I got into hip-hop, and you were a big reason why, so I'm going to just keep that on the low. But I just want to know, from quick answer, what made everybody on the panel want to get into hip-hop from the beginning? What was it that struck a chord in your body that said you wanted to be a DJ, a journalist, an MC, a producer, or even a historian of hip-hop? What made you want to do it in the first place, and what was the passion and difference you wanted to make in your dealings in it from the beginning?
De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising.
Okay, mine's a little longer. I had a very good friend of mine. Some of you in the audience know him. His name was DJ Dusk, and me and him used to have deep conversations about music. And we used to talk about, oh, do you know about this record? Do you know about that record? He taught me a lot about Latin music. I taught him a lot about Larry Levan and about the East Coast disco stuff. And he passed away in 2006. And I knew that once he died, there were certain songs that certain people were never, ever, ever going to hear again. I mean, no matter how vast their music was, I knew that there was certain music that once he died, they were never going to hear again. And that was when I made the decision to become a DJ. I learned how to DJ in 1993. And I was like, okay, cool, I know how to do it, great, all right. I don't want to own a lot of records. I don't want to buy turntables. I just want to, have fun with it. But once he died, I was like, I have to, because I feel like I got to fill that gap of educating people about music that they don't know about, and I got to keep it going. And that was it. As far as me getting into hip-hop in the beginning, Sugar Hill Gang, and Good Times, the Good Times break that they sampled, because Good Times was a disco song, and they sampled that and rapped over it. And I was like, what are they doing to the song? This is crazy. And my mother bought it because she didn't know anything about hip-hop. She just knew that they had done something different to Good Times, and she knew I liked it, and she liked it, so she bought it, brought it in the house, and that was the beginning of it all.
What's up, man? I got into hip-hop because it's just the way the culture hit me. The music represented the culture for me. And I remember when I was in like first or second grade, I used to live in upstate New York in a small town, all white, right? The only hip hop that I saw was a little bit of Run DMC, or heard was a little bit of Run DMC. And then when we moved from New York to LA, and I remember driving from upstate New York, being in third grade, driving through New York and seeing all the graffiti. I couldn't believe it. But I saw a lifestyle that blew me away. I'll never forget that moment. And we drove from New York to Georgia because we were flying from, I had family in Georgia, and we're flying from Georgia to move to California. So I spent about a week in Georgia, and on their radio, it was all hip hop, like black music and hip hop. And I just couldn't believe this lifestyle that was associated with this music. And we all know that punk is just like hip hop as far as, where it came from, and same kind of beliefs, generally speaking, And it was just a youth culture revolutionary thing that really just spoke to me. And watching the evolution throughout the years, watching how the subculture just was bubbling up. It was just something that was always just a part of me, as a dancer, DJ, producer, and just even going back to Brother Jay, I remember just watching their videos. And what he's talking about right now is just as far as substance. That substance goes back to a Marvin Gaye's What's Going On or Curtis Mayfield's Impressions, music that Martin Luther King was endorsing for his movement. That's the kind of stuff that hip hop was doing. And right now, there's not a lot of that, at least as far as popular music, but that culture that really grabbed me is what makes me still belong to hip hop.
Respect. Peace, Garth. And peace, Red. What's good, man? I got into hip hop for the juice. All right. I loved the fact that I could do a party in front of my house. I started DJing probably like 8, 9 years old, and I used to stand up on a crate and cut dance to the drummer's beat, and all kind of beat goes on, all kind of different breaks and whatnot. But the juice that I would get from the older heads as a young head was off the rack. And when you walk with that, you don't have to join no gang. It's like if you play ball good. You don't got to join no gang. You ain't got to do none of that. You just keep doing what you're doing. And finding breaks made me closer to my parents because I could ask who's Barbra Streisand, who's, any musician, Tina Turner, this, that, and the other, and they can give me a history from their time. There's no Google then. There's no, let me look this up. Moms and pops were the only people that can tell me the dance of the time. The style of the dress that was going on. See how her hair was sitting. That was the style, like y'all rock this now. I got a knowledge just digging in on what to play. And then I had to find the common denominator at the party to say, what am I going to play? Keep young heads on the floor and keep my parents dancing at the same time. When I got older, I started writing like that. That's why you hear X-Clan content the way it is, to where it's appealing for multi-generations and not just, oh, that's young, rap, whatever. That helped me create my signature. That is what, kept me in hip-hop. And the juice thing became a movement. So instead of me just one of my homeboys around the way, we were recruiting across the country. So my juice became a small army. So the goals were achieved through hip-hop.
I was listening to hip-hop music in Ireland, and certainly the most striking element of the music at that time was the energy. It was completely unlike everything else that we had access to, and there was a group of us that went through a sort of transition where we went from, listening to one or two things to solely listening to, finding homies who had Red Alert tapes from New York or, whatever it was. That's all we would listen to and talk about. But as far as actually deciding to become involved in the culture was a different process in the sense that it was, I came here for the first time in '88, and what I realized living in the Mission District at the height of the crack and AIDS epidemic was that the music, more than any other thing I had come across, and we're inundated with American popular culture, but more than anything I had seen or heard, that like NWA and KRS-One and Schoolie D prepared me for the reality of walking out the door of the warehouse I lived in on Clarion Alley between 16th and 17th, between Mission and Valencia, and walking to buy a beer at the store better than anything else I had seen. And to me, that was really a proper, I had a proper epiphany at that moment, And that was it then. I mean, that's our religion then for me. I mean, that's the way it's, I mean? I learned about the world in a new way from that moment onwards or whatever,
There are so many different things I could point to why I got into hip hop. I mean, I think maybe the one thing that the most powerful moment to me was kind of listening to Brian referenced DJ Red Alert and the shows he used to do in the late 80s on KISS in New York, and Brother Jay knows very well. They were just, they were so, it kind of, everything came together. I'd heard hip hop before, but what I think a radio show like that did, that K-Day did here in LA, was it brought the community together in a way that everyone was separated, but everyone was also together. In that one moment when that new song was being debuted and when these guys were talking or this new artist came out, that's one thing I think that's really missing. And a lot of the things that people might point to as to why hip-hop is not as good or not as real as it used to be or whatever is there's a lack of community, I think, and there's a lack of kind of geographical pride in a way, too, that really bonds together a scene. And that's the same thing with punk, too. There's, Rodney on the Rock, and there's there are certain kind of communal things. I think Amoeba having a record store that kind of serves both artists and fans where they can kind of meet in the middle, too. So, I mean, I would definitely recommend, if you're not familiar with DJ Red Alert or also K-Day Mix Masters, I would go back, and because you can't find this stuff online, which is not a luxury that most of us had when we were younger, where we could just call up something from 20 years earlier and kind of experience it. But just imagine when you're listening to the K-Day stuff and you're listening to Red Alert, like as if that was the first time you'd ever heard Ultramagnetic MCs or the Jungle Brothers or the X-Clan, and just what that would have felt like, because there's nothing like it. It was just electric.
One of the things in Brian's book that I think spells out for me, in terms of my own connection to this story, is that is hip hop as a kind of as a cultural climate change in a lot of ways that was always linked to a social movement, and that's something that we actually haven't talked about that much up here. But one of the things in your book, Brian, is that you can see the way that hip hop, especially, I mean, your book came out in '93, as a kind of both predictor and a soundtrack to the '92 uprisings, that connected back to the Watts uprisings, the '65, 50th anniversary coming up next year. That this music historically as a cycle, I mean, it's not music. It's climate, it's weather that has always been linked on its best days to social change. And I know that there's been a lot of talk up here about the lack, in the moment right now. But I mean, with all that's been going on in Ferguson, the first responders culturally to Mike Brown's death were hip hop artists. Killer Mike having an op-ed in Billboard, J. Cole putting his song out on SoundCloud within 3 days. It's not that impulse isn't dead either. And so I think that the kind of link to social justice is something that I know, for at least for some of my students also, who are 19, 20 years old, that's what they want out of hip hop. Even if they can't find it, that's what they want out of it. So I'm glad it's there.
Want it from consistent artists,
sure.
Not someone that's riding the moment.
Fair enough.
You feel what I'm saying? If you ride their catalog out, you can't enjoy that same vibration. That's an opportunity.
Yes. Okay. We have. How are we doing on time? 2 more? 3 more questions. Okay, 1, 2, and then 3. Yep.
I guess first to start off, favorite album. That's just a quick one. But I guess I believe.
How about not questions for the whole panel?
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Then I believe conscious and political hip hop is a powerful tool, unlike others that can inspire and motivate social change in an audience that may otherwise be immune to many other social messages. Do you see this type of hip hop making a resurgence in mainstream? If so, how do you see it happening? And how can we do this? How can we make it happen?
Brother Jay's got to start with that one.
Go ahead.
I don't think conscious music needs a commercial platform, all right? Because there's too many rules that you have to abide by on that platform. You know what I'm saying? There's no limits. It's a constant feed for drama, and consciousness is a constant need for peace. You feel me? The messages that we were allowed to transmit back in the days was telling the story of what was going on. You know what I'm saying? And it was accepted by people who were a little bit more consistent. When I look at Chuck saying fight the power, I could look at him now doing the same thing. It wasn't me gathering a bunch of cats, spit 16 bars, and then tomorrow you hollering gin and juice, F a hole, whoop-de-whoop. You feel me? We don't demand consistency. So the commercial market is flash in the pan hit. Mm-hmm. The two don't mix. That's why I tell conscious artists, stop fighting to be in a market that you don't want to be. You don't want the pressure of having to listen to the radio to determine how you're going to write. You got to be hip to what's happening in the streets to know how to be a messenger and write correctly. That's 2 different worlds. Commercial cats are detached.
Oliver, quickly.
I would just add that if the people lead, musicians will make the choice if they want to follow or not. I think it's oftentimes people get it backwards. They think it's the musicians who are leading the movements. Someone like James Brown didn't make, I'm Black and I'm Proud because he was trying to lead the Black Power movement.
That's right.
It's because he saw the Black Power movement and he wanted to get a piece of that. And I think that when we expect our artists to be our leaders rather than us being our own leaders, we're getting it backwards. So I think conscious music, whatever you want to term it, whatever genre that comes from, it will come, but you first have to have the people leading the movement, and then the musicians can make the decision of how they want to be involved with it or not. And if they're not involved with it, that's okay. I'd rather see the movement succeed than the music succeed.
Yeah.
First of all, this is more of a thank you to you guys than a question, because I really believe in synchronicities. So for me to be here right now is random and not, though. So to kind of piggyback off what you said was Mos Def, just to quote his very first solo album, the first thing he says is where people are wondering where is hip hop going? It's where are the people going? So I found that hip hop is something that you can draw from. And also I finished a book today, man. So there's still people reading books and stuff.
It's good for Brian.
I believe, as an artist myself, I think that music is going through a really, to compare it to hair, is it's going through a weird phase before you grow your hair out. It looks really strange, but I promise if the elders and people like you, people like all of you guys on this panel, just keep believing and actually mentoring the kids that are actually coming up, and people that you see that you're damn, even if you just see them on Twitter, you're yo, reach out to them and be that's actually a really dope song. That would mean a lot and really power and fuel the next people that are actually working on the next thing. And one of my missions personally is to add physical value back to music, because I think that it's all digital right now, and we got to get it more physical again. So being here is a physical movement of that. So I just want to thank you guys.
Thank you.
And our last question, right here. Yes, sir.
So Brian had talked about some of the antecedents to what became hip hop, like rapping, that's come from the African diaspora. And I just wanted to see if anyone wanted to talk to what it was about the early 70s in the South Bronx, one of the poorest, most violent parts of the United States. Like, what is it about that that took those elements that we saw Blowfly rapping in '69, like people were rapping in Jamaica? Like, what was it about the South Bronx that sort of like created this cultural revolution, this youth culture that really changed the face of popular music around the world?
I think we spoke on it earlier. The hunger, brother. You know what I'm saying? And you know, and when you're hungry, man, you hold on to traditions a little differently. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people who are in the Ifa tradition, when you say the Bronx, you know, there's a lot of what they call Santeria or Vodou science, Ifa tradition. There's a lot of that. So when you're playing those djembes and you're getting it, the capoeira becomes breakdancing. You know what I'm saying? The griot becomes the MC. You know what I'm saying? And then other boroughs catch on to say, yo, man, there's a dope griot in the Bronx, man. Well, I'm the Brooklyn representative. I'm the Queens representative. You know, I'm the drummer here on this side. And then the posse start to create. That hunger makes the greatest chance in the hits because you call into the creator. Hear my voice. Take me where I gotta go. Take me to my destiny. You know what I'm saying? That's a different vibration. You know what I'm saying? That's that thing that wakes you up 3 in the morning. It's not composed to where you 7 in the morning, put your pen and da-da-da. It's 3 in the morning, you're wiping your eyes, you're writing on a napkin. You know what I'm saying? That hunger makes that type of powerful music, you know, in my opinion.
I mean, I would say too, I mean, definitely everything that Brother Jay said. And a lot of times it's not, none of this stuff is made in a lab. None of it is, some of it's made in a lab in the recording sense, but there are always turning points, but it's all very random as to when things occur, when different people meet, when different people come together. I mean, that's definitely one of the things that runs through all of the chapters in my books, which is the story of pretty much any recording group or group of artists, et cetera, is that there are always these moments where there's a tipping point and it goes one way or the other, and maybe this certain group never came together, but maybe that artist would have done. So I think overanalyzing it is kind of like, it's more about just celebrating what happened, and it's like, I don't know why it exactly happened. It was just this beautiful cauldron that came together with a bunch of creative people who wanted to express themselves, and that's the way they did it. In the same way that happened in Brazil and Jamaica and on the West Coast and wherever. I think that's the beauty of it, is how all these people come together. None of it's planned, and that's the beauty of it. It's just I mean, X-Clan was a fascinating group. That was one of the most interesting groups I've ever chronicled, in that Jay was so much younger than Professor X and Paradise. And so there was like kind of youth and the elders, which was such a huge tradition and what you guys are all about, but that was within the same group. That also created different kind of frictions too, but that's what happens when you're in a group. When you're just a soloist, then things are kind of a lot easier. I can't even imagine what RZA was going through with Wu-Tang trying to Protect Your Neck made. I literally can't even envision what he was dealing with, and I think it speaks to how powerful a personality he is and what a powerful leader he is, that he could draw all those guys together. But that's a whole other story for another day. So I think the beauty of it is with hip-hop or any other music, it's how people come together from different backgrounds. Even if you're from the same block in the South Bronx, that doesn't mean you have the same background as the person that you end up teaming up with. It's kind of what you do with the energy that's kind of produced to you and how you emanate it out.
But to connect specifically to that question, right? There's no history of hip hop in the South Bronx that isn't also a history of the ravages of hypercapitalism, right? And no story of the creation of hip hop that's ever been told. I mean, cosmology, community, all that's there, linked to the social emergency and the economic emergencies of devastated neighborhoods, and that stretches from the Bronx to South LA to Kingston.
And just to, this is weird, it doesn't even sound like it's on. I know. Just to connect it to Brazil, Estacio the neighborhood that Samba came out of in the teens, if you look at it, is a massive displacement of people from Bahia, Afro-Brazilians, being displaced in a way that had never, on a scale that had never happened before in that country. And at precisely that moment is when the first sambas are recorded. And that naming, that somehow bringing a bunch of traditions together in this sort of like, you know, strike of lightning happens at exactly that same moment, you know, which for me, you know, that's the echo somehow. It's all those things together somehow.
Check the Technique, Volume 2, Brian Coleman. Huge thank you to this incredible gathering of folks. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. For those of you who want round 2, tomorrow night,
you want to talk about tomorrow night?
At Adrian's spot downtown.
In downtown LA at a place called the Art Form Studio. It's a record store and hair salon. And we're continuing this tomorrow, and we got special guests like Ali Shaheed Muhammad. Brother Jay just whispered in my ear that he was going to be there tomorrow night.
Yeah.
He just said that.
Doing a sample
and
only
you are
set.
definitely going to be there, or it's canceled. Red Maddox going to be there. But basically, I just want to celebrate. I want to celebrate this culture, and I want to celebrate the fact that there's people like Brian that feel it's important to spend a lot of their time to capture what's going on. So we're going to do that tomorrow from 7 to 10. It's the Art Form Studio in downtown LA, and it's free. So
thank you guys all for coming. Drive safe, walk safe. Thank you guys.